back of the rim. Garnett on the slam. Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry.
And just like that, we are back for the 2025 NBA Contenders video. I do this every year, pretty much since like 2022, and I think in that year I started off listing way too many contenders. I normally take the temperature of the fan base to see who people think are contending, and just in case I'm missing anyone. This year I think I got way more answers than I was supposed to, and I specifically narrowed it down to teams I think are contending, then ones that should be worth a mention but I don't think are actually contending, if that makes sense. A lot of factors went into it, as will be explained throughout the video, like today's sponsor, Factor, who I highly recommend. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. With over 35 amazing options to choose from per week, it takes the stress out of meal planning, cooking, grocery store runs, and brings them straight to you in trays which are already prepared, and the only thing you've got to do is poke a hole in the top and throw it in the microwave for 2 minutes. Meanwhile, if you've got the bad habit of overpriced takeout, Factor is cheaper and objectively way better. You're getting restaurant quality meals delivered right to your door. With these factors, no pun intended, in my own life, the biggest thing it's saving is time. After a full day of working on projects and taking care of a kid, the most dreadful part about eating after the gym is thinking about preparing it. And with Factor, they're already sitting in the fridge. They're ready to go. I haven't had to make a grocery trip. I haven't had to spend more money than I need to. They also offer so many quality options, I'm not getting tired of the food. I can just keep switching it up, keep it fresh. And with the food being this good, it's extremely convenient. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50DOM2K to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50DOM2K at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. The Celtics look like a team with championship hangover if I've ever seen one. One night they're making a statement, the very next they've lost to a squad who shouldn't be on the same court. That being said, they're clearly still a dominant unit with more than enough to get the job done when healthy, which they kind of need to do. Winning a title will always be cool, but the perception of the 2024 ring seems a bit like how it was with the 2015 Warriors in that you did it, cool. Now we want to see you do it again when every single factor doesn't line up in your favor. It's fair criticism. I've maintained nobody in the East was beating them last year. I think we know this, yet obviously it took the fun out when each round was missing somebody crucial. In 2025, they're gonna have some much bigger tests to pass. Cleveland has been more than solid the entire year and just made a huge trade which felt specifically for Boston. While I don't think New York is in the same tier based on depth alone, the series would still be a lot more challenging than it even would have been last year. The first round is probably going to end up relatively easy at this rate. The semis and conference finals, however, should bring respectable matchups. Then I have a heavy suspicion the finals would bring a heavyweight who really matches up with them better than anybody in the league. Even if it didn't, any team who was able to make it out of the West would be an impressive challenger. Long story short, Boston can initiate the first repeat of the 2020s while answering a lot of questions from last year and quieting critics for good. Back-to-back simply puts you in rare air, and it'd mean a ton for a group who finally got to the mountaintop in general after so many cracks at it. Tatum and Brown specifically would start to enter some interesting conversations as a duo, and don't look now, but Drew would be on ring number 3. Boy, if Cleveland were able to get it done, it'd honestly be one of the more impressive start-to-finish rebuilds I've seen in my time. First, talk about a franchise who hasn't done much of anything without LeBron in its history. Swooping in to grab Donovan Mitchell, which was way more random than it's remembered for, drafting well beforehand and making good deals after. Then when the team looks like it's reaching a dead end, which would probably happen before they reach contention, they swap coaching staffs and commence one of the best starts in NBA history. After managing to keep Mitchell on a team nobody would have called top tier over summer. Hopefully it'll be remembered how they weren't really close to a ring before 2025. Good for sure, just A, not better than Boston, and B, not actually contending. Hell, between the Celtics title and New York making their moves, Cleveland was little more than an afterthought. Consecutive disappointing postseasons did little to help. Everything has come together here so much so, we were flirting with the idea of them winning 70 games. I personally believe they'll still fall short around May, however, they're way closer to beating Boston with Hunter than they were a month ago. And if they do, they'll also have had to A, fight through a challenging East, and B, take out an absolute dog out West. Accomplishing this feat a year after looking like a tune-up for the eventual champs, winning a title within a decade of LeBron leaving for a second time, great for the franchise and astronomical for Donovan Mitchell's career. I really think it'd elevate him to another tier. He'll have come a pretty long way from that time when he was hugging the floor in disappointment. Finally, they wouldn't have to figure out what's next with Mitch. The roster damn near looks as good as it realistically could around him right now. It's usually the time where you hope your young core can eventually win one, or else you don't really know the changes that it would take to elevate them further would even work out. There's actually a team on this list later who is pretty much about to be in this scenario. How many times in recent memory has a young team with loads of potential actually panned out when we thought they would? The OKC team just a decade earlier, for various reasons, failed to do just that when they never recovered from 2012. The modern Thunder have spent years now drafting, improving, and getting healthy leading up to 2025, where they're currently a historic team. Elite defense, versatility, depth, scoring, a likely MVP. In terms of contention, they aren't missing much. Meanwhile, their oldest players are 30. Yeah, if they come through, it'll be of great relief to a fan base who are probably a bit traumatized from watching a sure thing fall apart once already. At the ripe ages of 22, 23, and 26, Chet, J-Dub, and Shea would be NBA champions as part of a unit who currently have an enormous window. Despite their ages and opportunity though, I'd assume they feel the urgency to get it done today. Last year's loss to Dallas was understandable, but everything immediately got better. The tenured players progressed, management patched up roster deficiencies over summer, and their start to this year was probably the best it could have possibly been. Another early elimination would not only be disappointing, you just also never know when some bullshit is about to hit. The disease of more, which has routinely infected contending teams, future injuries, the business of basketball. Time is on their side, and I'd still imagine 2025 would feel like a massive missed opportunity. Just to put into perspective how high most have been on their chances, OKC is largely seen as the only team who matches Boston pound for pound. It's also very likely to be either them or Cleveland. Shea would probably see the greatest benefit, as he's on the way to MVP as we speak, averaging one of the highest points per game in NBA history, and is no doubt the target of some upcoming vicious criticism. He's this era's target for taking the brunt of teasing about free throws. Every era has one, and he's currently taking the mantle. After such an accomplished season, another premature exit would probably start the process of both he and OKC falling out of public favor, while fans choose to ignore whatever it is they go on to do in future regular seasons. It would be the easiest, oh yeah, they're fun, but too inexperienced or unreliable, in history. Would also be nice for Chet to go ahead and post one while there's a pretty obvious rivalry brewing with his counterpart who garners even more future expectations. I want to say, barring injuries, I don't think this is the year for New York, and I pretty much feel this way for the rest of the teams I'm about to discuss. I simply see them as a tier below the former three, and stick around to the end to hear the very obvious reason why. When we looked at the roster they put together over summer, it was the roster for the Brunson era, the go for it move. Trading last year for OG, acquiring Cat and Mikal, it was fairly clear management had their ideas for finishing this core and they executed. It's been fun as well. The usual from Brunson, amazing production from Cat, well-rounded lineups, except they just don't go too deep unfortunately. Mitchell Robinson has still yet to debut, and while I doubt we were counting on him to be around consistently anyways, he definitely represented a feature in rim protection their lineups could have sorely used. 20th in defensive rating ain't cutting it for a contender. With Cat at center, Precious as a backup, and them mostly playing the core heavy minutes, I just don't see New York getting the bench production needed in a series against teams a tier above them. Specifically on D, it's feeling a bit unlikely they'd be able to hang with the established contenders. That being said, there aren't too many leaps you'd have to take to mentally see them in a finals. Tweaked ankle here, strained calf there, and boom, the path opens up rather quickly. If they were to end up pulling it off, well, first, as we speak, they sport the lowest defensive rating of any champ in quite some time. Yeah, guys, this is not happening. But if it did, New York would prosper on the biggest stage for the first time since the Richard Nixon administration. The plot to sign Brunson in 2022 will have paid off in the biggest way possible, going heavily against the grain of a franchise who seemed to only squander its stars in recent memory. Cat, 1 year after being part of one of the most successful Timberwolves teams ever, would add hardware next to the title of greatest shooting big man of all time. Overall, it'd be a massive vindication for a city donning the title Mecca of basketball, who mostly had it called into question over the last 20 years or so. Oh, I can't help but wonder how Brunson would be viewed either. It hasn't been that long since the discourse concerning winning a title with a small guard at the head. I think this was a bit more relevant when those hopes weighed mostly on his shoulders, yet I still wonder how it affects him specifically. He's been so good while still being viewed below more established names. It's one reason I didn't think Dallas would even want to pay his asking price a couple years back. It's a long shot, but gold would pay dividends. Directly after their big summer with a title in mind. Don't forget Tibbs having a championship as a head coach. He was on that Boston staff in 08. And yeah, a lot has happened to his perception since then. I just think it would be really funny. Apparently this is shocking to people, especially right now when they're riding a win streak, but I think Denver would need a break as well. I do want to point out, pretty much most of 2025, the teams they've been playing have not been too impressive, and the impressive teams they played have beaten them. For the most part, Jokic is a walking historic stat line on any given night, and Murray rebounded nicely from the fall off at season's beginning. Still, we're talking about a title team who lost vital wing versatility in the years after their triumph, and remain with no acceptable backup center for Jokic, leaving those minutes to 100-year-old DeAndre Jordan or just Aaron Gordon most nights. However, it is great consolation that Westbrook ended up being a very positive addition. It could have gone the other way. Is this a good team who technically always has a chance because they're sporting one of history's most astonishing players next to a decent supporting cast? Absolutely. But between the questions I have about their lineups in depth, followed by them being very average defensively, I honestly don't know why people are so high on them winning another championship right now, other than the fact their current trophy is barely 2 years old. Obviously, winning 25's hardware would not only be a major accomplishment, it'd be super convenient for a roster which hasn't had a ton of flexibility over the years. Calvin Booth minced no words letting both KCP and Brown go consecutively, while also just recently saying he believed there was a drop-off on the roster after a couple of guys on the bench. In about the first month or so of the season, I was worried Jamal was really far behind where I thought he'd be, and wondered aloud what the possibilities were for Denver if Jokic's number 2 wasn't really a number 2 already. Winning another one after Murray's early struggles and the yearly roster drop-off could really ease their minds going forward. Not to mention it once again catapult Joker. I mean, as it's going, he might not beat Shea for his 4th MVP, yet he's got 3 already in the 2020s to go along with a title and finals MVP, sitting atop some of the craziest statistical outings we may ever see, especially from a center. After a second, the conversations would probably shift about how much more he needs to do before entering the top 10. Oh, and let's not get started on the all-time center convos, which are already intriguing. Don't forget the prospect of Westbrook adding jewelry finally. It's just never worked out where he's gone, whether he was a star of the team or in a supporting role. The noise hasn't been as present this year with him exceeding expectations, making it the perfect opportunity to cap off what's been an electric and controversial career. It wouldn't even be one of those Gary Payton rings either. He damn near helped keep them afloat this year. Finally, Calvin Booth would probably walk to center court and take a bow. Seriously, he detailed why he didn't mind losing core pieces year by year, to the point they're being called contenders off the strength of Jokic today, meanwhile ranking 17th in defense. Funny enough, Denver is the only team of the millennia to rank so low in D and win the title. Every other unit was top 10. I will point out their path for that year was an injured Timberwolves, injured/inferior Suns, and the play-in Lakers. Not as a knock, just pointing out the defense would very likely be a much bigger problem given the conference this time around. They were already the favorites back then. The final team I'm going to take time to mention here is the Memphis Grizzlies, and I'll point out that of the finals teams here I think would need a stretch to win it, the Grizz are the only of the bunch with a top 10 defensive rating, top 10 on both sides of the ball actually. Memphis finds themselves in a peculiar spot because at this point, fans have really just stopped checking for them, similar to what I was projecting for OKC if they suffered another year or two coming up short. Although injuries have played a part, their come-up story started in 2022 when they were trying to challenge Golden State. 3 whole years ago. In the time since, we've had jaw suspension, countless injuries, and what I'd call marginal roster improvements in that they've mostly been organic additions, and not the trade or free agency splashes we've seen elsewhere. Through 54 games, it helps nothing how Ja has appeared in only 32. And if they're one of your league pass teams, it's hard not to notice how he randomly pops in and out of the lineup. Meanwhile, Jaren Jackson is having possibly his best season yet, earning his 2nd All-Star appearance and leading the team in scoring. I guess to really believe they'd do it, the roster is missing 2 things: a reliable jaw and one more difference-making wing. When it comes down to it, it's kinda like I said in the 2020s vid last year. This is a great core, but for a prolonged run, it's hard to believe they currently have enough star power, or that the supporting cast around the main 3 will hold. They're simply better teams right now. Oh, they agree as well. As Bob Myers recently revealed during the trade deadline, Memphis once again went after Durant. 2nd time in 3 years, by the way. All things considered, if they did manage to run the table, it'd be the summation of years of struggle and waiting. Would also very much ease their minds about what comes next. Another year with a similar roster coming up short is eventually going to warrant making the big move they've been trying to do for a couple years now. While Ja was out, they were able to make some crucial pickups. But do they believe those pickups are part of the ultimate goal? Are they enough? Their core are all mid-20s, which on today's timeline means it could still go either way. They could wait it out and eventually scale the mountain, or end up as part of blockbuster deals before one of them starts complaining. Regardless, their come up basically got overshadowed by other young teams rising through their random idle periods. And now people aren't even expecting a real run. Still, if you've convinced yourself teams who aren't top 10 defensively can win the title, which has rarely ever happened, you at least have to bring them up in conversation. And yeah, that about does it. Especially after so many years, I am just not in the habit of calling every team that looks good or is fun a contender. I think this is how you get guys in my comment section recommending the Los Angeles Clippers, and yeah, it actually applies to the Lakers right now. I've watched just about everything they've done with Luka so far. I do think Luka's going to get even better, and I love how Braun looks. I love how the fit looks. I just don't think that roster is ready right now. I think they're going to be fun. I think they're going to move up in the standings. And with the job JJ is doing as coach, yes, they're going to be interesting in the playoffs. I just don't think they're going to beat specifically the OKC Thunder 4 times. And I also don't think they would win a championship. I don't think the depth is there, specifically at the center position. This is a team even with AD, which was not top 10 in offense or defense. And look, these duo players are gonna be really scary and keep looking fun. Once you get to the playoffs though, LeBron, Luka, and shooters is just not enough to get it done by itself, especially when you don't actually know how those shooters are gonna perform in the postseason. I could get flack for leaving them off. I just don't see it for them right now. The way it's looking though, they do some stuff over summer, we can have this conversation in 2026. Let me know who you think this year's contenders are. Do you agree or disagree with any of the teams in this video or my assessment of the teams in this video? Leave that in the comment section, while also hitting the subscribe button and bell next to my name if you want notifications every time a new video drops. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.